views expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
Welcome to Cultural Brilliance Radio, the DNA of organizational excellence with Claudette Rowley. Conversations that are transforming the world of culture and business. Claudette brings fresh, innovative perspectives that push the boundaries of what organizational cultures can and should be. Learn how to catalyze your organization's workforce into an authentic, intentional, and financially successful culture. Now here's your host, Claudette Rowley.
Hey, everybody, welcome. It's so great to have all of you tuning us in and turning us on. I love these conversations I get to have with Claudette Rowley here on Cultural Brilliance Radio. And the reason that I love them is because many of us work in organizations. And, some folks say that we are a reflection of the organization, and the organization is a reflection of who we are. Now, I am not the expert in this area, but Claudette really is. The question then becomes, how can change be revealed? Can we actually change the culture of an organization? And, this is an interesting conversation for a number of us, and you'll see why. Because we kind of think, maybe almost believe that, wait a minute, I'm kind of self-employed. I don't really need to listen to this. Or wait a minute, by the way, I'm part of a small business office here. We're doctors, and maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute, I'm part of a radio network. I'm not sure what that culture looks like. Well, that's why Claudette's in the house today. Claudette Rowley. She is actually CEO of Cultural Brilliance, which is a fabulous organization that helps companies get at what is going on that's blocking them from establishing, creating, and changing to the best culture they could possibly have. And that's what today is about. So how do we go about this? How do we make sure that organizations learn from this? What can we do? Now, this is just a small part of what Claudette does. Beyond working with organizations on culture, she brings knowledge, information, workshops, webinars, webcasts, you name it. It's about creating an authentic dialogue so that companies can take a really look in a very safe way and say, oh, maybe we could do things differently. So today, can we change culture? How to improve organizational culture? Hotly debated, but can we change it? Claudette, welcome. It's great to have you here. I mean, isn't this interesting? We don't really look maybe at the company we're working for as having a culture, do we?
Often we don't, Pat. And I'm thrilled to be talking about this today. It's such a great topic. Can we change culture? Often people exist. This is one of the interesting aspects of culture is that because we're in an organization, we sometimes forget it's there. It's like being in your, family growing up. You didn't really think about whether you were in a family or not. You just were in one. And organizational culture can sometimes be like that for people. They don't really think about it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, do you find that the longer that you're in the organization, the more sort of embedded you are as being part of it, so you really can't see things perhaps that people that are newer to the organization might see? Or do you think some things are just obvious all around?
I think it's a mixed bag. Sometimes new people in the organization are going to notice things that everyone else has just accepted as part of how we operate as an organization. And then people who have been there a number of months or years are really familiar with the culture. They're the ones that know all that unspoken, the unspoken norms. We only, talk to so-and-so about certain topics. We never bring this up with the CEO, or we only bring it up in certain ways. So those folks are going to know all those things no one ever talks about, but everyone sort of, understands in their organizational language that they have to, rules they have to follow, ways of doing things that they need to use as guides.
Yeah. The word change, you know, when you say the word change, what kind of emotion does it bring up for people in the organizations now?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
A couple of different answers come to mind. One
Okay.
is that for some folks, they're going to cringe because they're
Yeah.
handling change after change after change.
Hmm.
Other people who have been waiting for a particular change to happen, perhaps like they've known it for a long time that something needed to change, might feel excited or relieved that the wheels are finally turning.
Hmm.
I heard a speaker recently say, who's a coach high up in a lot of organizations, and he said, when we talk about today's rapidly changing environment or things like that, or change is constant, he said it's at the point now where change is how people operate in organizations. It's not that there's too much change. It's not that it's rapid. It just is what it is now. Rapid change is how people live. And his assertion was that people are really at the end of what they can humanly cope with in terms of change. Like that it can't speed up anymore because people are already scrambling to try to keep up. Interesting perspective.
Yeah, it is. I mean, as people try to keep up, isn't that actually a change that has been going on in organizations, right? I mean, that's part of the change that's happening at a global level now is, people trying to keep up because we're now in organizations that are demanding almost like a one-touch delivery on things, right? I mean, that's the very nature that technology has driven. But what are some of the other drivers that affect an organization or a culture that may push them to change in whether they want to or not?
Sometimes often it's external factors. Maybe they're falling behind their competition.
Yeah.
They're not keeping up in some way. They're not making the money they need to make. Unfortunately, although we might think change should come from other things like people are suffering or being disrespected, it's often going to come from the externals. And however, as long as change is functional and productive, however it gets there is however it gets there.
Yeah. I mean, is it maybe too much to say that cultures do evolve?
I don't think it's too much to say that at all. I think cultures are actually, unless they've gotten really stuck and entrenched in a certain way, if we really can step back and look at culture, organizational culture, and any culture really, it is actually evolving, almost all the time. And sometimes it'll evolve in a way that's very dramatic or rapid, and that's when we'll tend to notice it. But it really, because it's people learning and interacting, and with internal influences and external influences, culture is, my perspective is that it's always evolving.
I think let's just take a moment, if we could, for people that, are tuning in, maybe have heard the dialogue on organizational culture or culture in general. But let's talk for a minute about what cultural is. What makes up the word culture? When we hear it from an organizational point of view, obviously it's got to have some kind of defining, set of circumstances or ideas. What is it that makes up a culture?
Yeah, I think of it in two different ways.
Okay.
One is that it's a set of beliefs and assumptions people have about what their organization values and expects from them. And so those beliefs and assumptions may or may not be true, but you could have almost a whole entire workforce in an organization believing something or assuming something about what's expected, and that's what they'll operate. They'll operate based on that. For example, if a company, if people believe and assume that you need to stay at work as long as the leader or CEO stays at work, whether or not that's true, they will assume that will eventually become part of the culture, that we need to stay there until the CEO leaves, even if that's 10 at night.
Yeah.
As an example of that. Another way, and this is definitely a nod to Ed Kirshine, who defines culture as the way, what we learn together as a workforce, as a set of employees. What we learn as we make decisions, solve problems, and move initiatives forward. We're always learning, and as we're learning and interacting together, our culture forms and evolves from there. And I love both of those definitions.
Is there a case being made on both sides? Like one is, oh yeah, we can change the workplace culture. Oh no, we can't. Is there this? What's this hot debate about?
Yeah, I think the hot debate about it is there's some folks who say, culture's everything, and so we need to come in and change the culture. And then others come in and say, well, yeah, culture's there and it's important, but we really need to look at other levers. Like, could we change a business process? Can we empower people more? Can we come in strategic ways to intervene that will get us where we need to go as an organization, but we don't necessarily need to actually look at the culture itself. And then there are other folks who think, the culture, because culture is driving everything. And I think of culture as another way of thinking about it is it's the same way as individual people. We have a mindset or a perspective on things. That's like our internal culture. That's the way our own individual culture about the world. And so then we have this collective, larger culture in an organization, this cultural intelligence that is always operating. And I think that so people, there are different schools of thought, Don't focus too much on culture. Focus on changing other aspects of the organization. Other people saying culture is everything. Focus there.
I think that for most people listening, they look at their organization and there are things that come to the surface that for them are very defining. They're defining moments that they can recall about the organization, the culture, the people in it. And, they want more information about, how do I act here? What do I do? What happens if what I believe in, my values, what happens if they're different? We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the neuroscience of culture, everyone. Claudette Rowley is in the house. Cultural Brilliance Radio right here, the DNA of organizational excellence. We'll be right back. Welcome to the Dr. Pat Show, talk radio to thrive by. I am so thrilled to be talking to all of you. We have got talk radio for all of us. Are you ready and willing and able to accept all of the abundance you can muster up in your life? Yeah! Check us out, thedrpatshow.com, transformationtalkradio.com, transformationradio.fm.
Song of the Heart, Walking the Path of Light, from author and healer Francine Vale, is available now. Through Francine's life story, we learn how imperative it is to love one another. Once this simple truth is learned, peace on earth will prevail. Song of the Heart is a life lived and a story told for this purpose. To learn more about Francine and her amazing gifts, or to order your copy of the book today, visit angelsandlightbeings.com.
Are you ready to thread your life with intuition? Intuit Apparel can help you do just that. This is not just about a piece of clothing. This is about a movement, an awakening, and staying centered in life. Your life. Intuitive and host of the radio show Get Into It, Lynn Brown, was given this image with the intention of a clothing line designed to represent the essence of life itself. Visit intuitapparel.com now and wear your intuition with pride.
Holistic Medical Center is where you find it all. A healthy space with doctors who care, see, and listen to the whole you. Hi, this is Dr. Darvish. If you have not found an answer to your chronic symptoms, you will find answers here at Holistic Medical Center. Our doctors find the root cause of your symptoms and guide your body towards healing naturally. We transform lives from within. Visit drdarvish.com or call 425-451-0404.
A word of caution: if you prefer the status quo and you are not interested in improving every aspect of your life, this book will trigger the shift out of you. The Truth is Funny, Shift Happens is available now. Author Colette Steffen brings the powerful knowledge and life-changing energy and empowerment from the radio airwaves to the pages of her new book. To get your copy in paperback or ebook, visit thetruthisfunny.com today.
Sky Siegel co-hosts one of today's most popular psychic shows, Angels and Answers, with Artie Hoffman, as she communicates healing messages from the spirit world. These messages can be astounding, enlightening, and life-changing. Born with the God-given talent of inner guidance and the amazing ability to heal, Sky has healed thousands of people. Schedule a reading with Sky now. Call 908-500-1474 and visit skyofangels.com.
Wow. Hey, everybody. Yeah, I love this. Cultural Brilliance Radio, the DNA of organizational excellence. Claudette Rowley is in the house. This is what she does. Cultural Brilliance is her organization. She is the CEO of Cultural Brilliance. But most importantly, the work that she does in organizations is about people. And, we often forget that we are talking about people. And if you're listening to this show and you're thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute, I might be running a company, but maybe I'm not. How do I have a conversation with Claudette and help my organization make a positive change? Because that's really what we're talking about. There's truly the dark side that many people hear about, many articles are written about. But this is about cultural brilliance. And what does that look like? What does that mean? And so today we're going to talk about, can we change culture? Can we change it? You all that are listening, you can go to the website culturalbrilliance.com and lots of information there. Also archives of Claudette's show, how to contact her. I love this next segment here in this idea, the neuroscience of culture, Claudette. I really love this. I love that term because most people see culture and culture change as complete chaos. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Can you tell folks what the neuroscience of culture is about, and how does it relate when we use that term neuroscience? What are we really looking at here?
Yeah, happy to, Pat.
Yeah.
It's an aspect of culture that is overlooked, I think, a lot of times. I mean, if you Google it, you're going to find information about it, the neuroscience of culture. But we're really saying that the culture we're in, the environment we're in, does impact our brains. It does it impacts the wiring in our brains. It impacts how we perceive things. It impacts how we handle certain tasks. And so organizations, not all organizations by any means, but a lot of organizations still think of culture as this optional thing. Like, we should really address our culture, but you know what? It's just so overwhelming. We're not going to. And here we are, yet every day, day in and day out, people are in the culture of the organization, even if they, let's say, work from home, right? But they're still impacted by the culture of the organization, which is impacting how they think about things, which is impacting their brains. That's the neuroscience part of it. And it will impact their overall performance in the organization. So when we look at the neuroscience of culture, we really start to understand at a fundamental level that culture does matter because it's impacting how we think.
And, now we're really talking about organizations. When we say neuroscience, we're talking about there's a system operating here. There's a system operating here. And, perhaps it's similar to the way that, you referred to the wiring. There are so many connections in an organization. It's really important to acknowledge them, right? I mean, isn't that really the first step of this? What we're talking about here today is, as we look at the neuroscience of culture, we're looking at, wait a minute, these are people and there are connections and people are connecting. How do you determine how that system is operating? Is it operating well? How do you go about working with organizations to say, wait a minute, this is what I see here, this is what I see here?
A lot of it is, and I feel like I say this in every Cultural Brilliance radio show, is listening. Listening and observing, and really start there. What do we see? What do people look like? And by look like, I mean also facial expressions. And how are they interacting with each other? What are they saying? What are they talking about? What's the quality of the conversation? What is not being said? What's the energy like? A month or two ago, I did an initial session with the team in a small organization, what I noticed was that I'd really been prepped by the leader. The leader had said, I'm not sure how this is going to go over with this team. These are some of their expectations. They're concerned this is going to be too fluffy, et cetera, et cetera. So I get in there and she prepares me well in terms of helping me understand the team. And the session actually went well. And she said, this went better than I thought. And then as soon as the session was over, I couldn't believe what changed, which was during our session, which was 3 hours, I think, there was calmness in the room. People were attentive and listening, very interactive. They did offer their opinions. They did interact with me and each other. Great. And then as soon as our session was over, the energy picked up like I couldn't believe. I'd almost never experienced such a quick change where they went into what I think was their normal mode, where people were racing all over the place. They were literally rearranging furniture for the next meeting. I mean, this was all within 30 seconds after we concluded our session. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it told me so much about their actual, probably authentic culture. It was that they're running so fast and so, everything was moving so quickly that I didn't even have time to pack up my stuff.
Wow.
Before they were on to the next thing.
Wow. Why do you think they were calm and peaceful, during your session? What was what was sort of the factor that influenced that?
I would probably two things. They were very prepped by their leader.
Okay.
And they of course, they knew I was coming, and they knew this was supposed to be more of a reflective session. And they're in the education field, so they're used to reflecting,
right,
as part of that paradigm. So they did get into it. They seemed to get a lot of value out of it and learn from it. But I thought, wow, if the culture, though, snapped back into place so quickly, how will they get to reflect again? How will they get to incorporate what they've learned today? I mean, it was really, really an interesting experience.
Yeah. So chances are they may not even have the time to reflect on that. I mean, what I hear you saying is very characteristics of a lot of organizations today, that are running so fast, they always feel like they're behind. So when there's an opportunity to look at doing something different or operating in a different way, don't you find that people really look at their watch and say, when am I going to fit that in?
Yeah, they do. And I actually had the privilege of hearing one of the leaders from the Center for Creative Leadership speak recently. And he does a lot of coaching all over the world. And he had a very dry sense of humor. And he said, I'm getting old now, so I can get away with saying a lot of things that other people couldn't. And he says he'll literally say to leaders, when was the last time you thought? When was the last time you sat down and thought about what you're doing? And he's actually gotten responses like, well, we don't have time for that. We don't have time to think, and so some of his coaching is around thought and action produce better results than action alone. And this was not, what he really just called it out, what so many people are experiencing and thinking is that people literally are saying, I don't have time to think. Now, when I say that, we all, if we stop, we all realize that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to take action without thinking first.
But the kind of thinking you're talking about, though, is not the thinking about what am I going to do next. You know what I mean? You're not thinking like, okay, I've got to go from A to B to C to D, right? You're thinking, how am I going to get there? And what's the shortest distance between 2 points to get me there? Not thinking about, well, wait a minute, let's stop for a minute and think about what might be possible here. That's, I think, the thinking that you might be referring to. It's that creative thinking, or is it just all of it? We're just kind of like marching to the next text message I get.
I think it's both. It's definitely the creative strategic thinking. Where you need a little space and time for it. And in some instances, I'm even seeing it's responding to problems and putting out fires, which, yes, requires thinking. But sometimes it's happening in ways that when you look at it, you reflect and say, that could have been done in an easier way.
Yeah.
That could have, and that, I don't mean that in a judgmental way, just more of people aren't even stopping for 10 minutes to just say, wait a minute here. What's the best course of action? Or let me consult with my colleague for a minute, and see what the best course of action might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does this affect creativity? Let's talk about creativity a minute, because creativity is part of the neuroscience of anything, I think. You know, there's like a creative vibe. There's this moment where ideas come together. I would imagine that going on a week-long retreat is not going to happen with this organization, right? But what do you do in situations like this? How do you help people take a moment to breathe, so to speak?
You know, it often starts with bringing this to their attention, you know, and getting their feedback on it, and saying, you know, having them start to think about and reflect on what would be possible for them if they did actually spend some time in whatever, you know, whether it's individually in some sort of group setting, did spend some time really reflecting on how well are they doing? What are areas that could be improved? What's their experience like? What do they think is getting missed? Yeah, because creativity does need some space and time periodically.
Yeah.
And without that, you're missing. Chances are most organizations are missing a lot of opportunities, particularly when part of their culture is let's move as fast as we possibly can.
Well, I mean, clearly there is this understanding of the connectivity of things when we're talking about neuroscience. We're talking about, you know, somebody's got to understand, or somebody's got to take a moment to understand the connections to things. Who is that person, and how do things get done? You know, what is the reason, the rationale why culture might need to evolve? How? But most importantly, why? Is it always out of the last ditch effort to make sure you're not missing a deadline? And what happens if you work for a phone company like I did and you miss that deadline that has to do with that fancy dancy new phone feature that you've got on your smartphone? Those things really do happen, and do we ever look at culture? Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Leslie Fontaine, and my show is Sheer Alchemy on TransformationTalkRadio.com. When we're bogged down with our emotions, the hardships that plague us in our relationships, at work, our finances, we literally can't see the higher plane where we could be operating from. Tune in to Leslie Fontaine, Sheer Alchemy on TransformationTalkRadio.com.
If you're one of the millions of Americans suffering from anxiety, you probably know how powerless and out of control this emotion can make you feel. This is why it is so important to remember that anxiety is created by your mind, which means that you can learn to use your mind to uncreate it. Hello, my name is Dr. Friedman Schaub. My award-winning book, The Fear and Anxiety Solution, provides you with a step-by-step breakthrough process to understand and resolve the root causes of your anxiety and build a solid foundation of confidence and inner peace. If you're ready to take your power back, visit thefearandanxietysolution.com. That's thefearandanxietysolution.com, or call 866-903-6463. That's 866-903-MIND.
Brand consultant and coach Jen Morgan is here with Radically Distinct Radio to help maximize your brand's power to produce results. Whether you're a person with a dream and unsure where to start, or a CEO of a successful company wondering what's next, Jen Morgan and the RAD method empowers you to play to your strengths and focus your competitive edge so you can show up in the world as your most powerful brand. Go to jenmorgan.com or call 206-972-5366.
Would you like to experience life-transforming adventures in personal expansion and world service? If you do, tune in to learn about magical innate abilities that you can develop and use to make your dreams come true. Joy Elaine is author of the Joy Chronicles And she's inviting you and millions of others to join her in working with galactic masters, angels, and the Ashtar Command as they assist humanity and planet Earth to achieve their ultimate destination of ascension. For more information about this upcoming event and broadcast, visit joyelaine.com. That's joy, ELAINE.com.
What if your body and mind were the compasses to the secrets, mysteries, and magic of life? Glenna Rice, co-host of The Questionable Parent, is inviting you to access all that is possible. Glenna is a 10-year certified veteran access consciousness facilitator who offers an amazing variety of life-changing classes and workshops. Work with Glenna from anywhere, with teleclasses and workshops all over the globe. To learn more and see Glenna's current schedule of events, classes, and workshops, visit glennarice.com.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. It's really great to have all of you tuning us in and turning us on. Cultural Brilliance Radio, Claudette Rowley is in the house. And as I said before, you want to find out just about everything that you could possibly think of, go to culturalbrilliance.com. There's also a way for you to sign up for this fabulous leadership mindset, which is absolutely great. Claudette puts those together, and you will receive those in your emails just to kind of like, you know, have a new level of awareness about what's possible in your organization. And, you know, stay on the edge of what the organization is about, what it might not be about, but what is leadership now about? And that's really, really kind of cool about that. You know, today we're talking about culture change. And this is a dialogue and a debate that's been going on decades and decades, I think. But you're bringing something different to the conversation. Claudette, when you're talking about cultural brilliance, you're talking about a way that the change could happen. And so that's kind of like what we're talking about now, how and why culture evolves. Mm-hmm. And what is the difference between how a culture may evolve and how a culture may evolve brilliantly. That's not the same always.
Not always.
Oh, no. Yeah. So how do cultures evolve?
Hey, cultures, sometimes cultures evolve because they're forced to. There could be a merger or acquisition. It happens. So, if you're going to make that kind of a change where you're bringing two cultures together, it's going to change and evolve. Absolutely. Or even a new leader coming on board. You have a new CEO, especially of a large organization. Chances are that person is going to make changes, or their personality or their style, leadership style, is going to be such that it pushes on the culture to shift and change it. The culture may not like that, but that leader may try to do that. You also, another common one could be some sort of restructuring or reorganization. Where your company's been U.S. based and now it's going to be global. There's going to be a site in India, there's going to be a site in Germany, things like that, where your culture is going to change because literally now you're multicultural. You have people from other cultures.
Yeah.
So now we're not just talking about organizational culture. We're talking about the culture of the countries people are from and living in. So then it gets even a little more complex. So. Yeah. Culture's going to evolve for those ways and for those reasons, and then sometimes it's a slower evolution. It could be something naturally over time. Going back to Edgar Schein's definition that culture evolves as we learn together. So it could be that as the business grows, the culture slowly over time changes. Yeah.
When it's changing slowly, I mean, there is an analogy that we use about change quite often, and it has to do with this little frog. And, I know for me that I was part of an organization for a long time, and that change in the organization happened really slowly until one day it didn't. And they decided, we're going to break up the phone company. It's a monopoly. We're going to break it up. Now we have a devastating change on what that means. And quite honestly, the telephone company really didn't recover in the way people thought. But it turned out that as a result of that ending, there were new possibilities that under the old culture could not emerge, right?
Right.
Could not emerge. There wasn't a mindset. There wasn't a need. We're seeing that kind of thing happen more and more with mergers, acquisitions. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of that going on, but we don't talk about it anymore because it's like second nature almost, right?
Yeah, and I think, and often we forget to your point in your example with the phone company, we forget to see that there are opportunities. So when a culture changes, particularly when it's something overt like a merger or acquisition, that there could, sometimes those are truly negative experiences for the people who work there. That's absolutely the case. And other times there actually can be possibilities that emerge for folks, a new opportunity to work in a new role, new resources, maybe a better leader. I mean, there really can be opportunities. And I think one of the other reasons that culture evolves is because there can be, and this can sometimes be the culture that evolves slowly and then all of a sudden it seems like there's this cultural disruption or chaos, is because there can be simmering unmet needs for a long time. It could be an unmet need in the workforce. It could be an unmet need that, we've needed to have a better, if it's a manufacturing company, we've needed to have a better production line in place or system in place for a long time, but we keep saying that and no one's addressing it. And so all of a sudden things are in disarray. We even see that today in our political landscape, where some people would say because of a lot of unmet needs people have had, we see certain political candidates coming to the forefront. And if those people's needs had been answered, we might not have, the candidates we have right now running for president. So unmet needs over time will cause any culture to evolve to the positive or the negative.
Yeah. And, we see this a lot, and we don't talk about this, but we see this a lot in sports, right? We see what happens the minute, and let's talk about this because leadership, right? I mentioned leadership before. Here we are, we're watching, our favorite team. And I guess where you live, you haven't changed, you all haven't changed your football coach in I don't know how long, long time. Us folks in Seattle, we changed our coach, 3-4 years ago, so to speak. But there are some teams that changing coaches on a regular basis. That means the leadership has changed to a point. What is the effect of that on culture? Let's say you don't go through a merger, you don't go through an acquisition, but all of a sudden now you've got a new CEO. How does that impact the organization? Is it the same?
It's not the same. And it really depends on the leader and CEO. Is that person, why is that person brought in? Because they're supposed to shake up the culture? Because the board, I'm making an example, the board has deemed that the culture needs to shift or the organization's not profitable enough and that CEO has been brought in to clean house. Well, then that culture is probably going to change quite a bit. Or there at least is going to be a lot of chaos in the culture if people don't like the changes that leader is proposing. Another leader could come in and maybe, again, he or she's supposed to handle, the company's bleeding money. Maybe there's, people are leaving. There's a revolving door or whatever and retention. But if they come in and they can do it in a way that aligns with the existing culture and improves it, then people won't feel that it's as jarring. They might feel like, oh, it's great this leader's here because now some of the problems that hadn't been solved for so long are being solved. He or she understands us and gets who we are. And so when that person proposes or even mandates certain changes or initiatives, they're going to be more easily accepted. So I think a lot of it has to do with why that CEO has been brought in and how they handle the culture that exists. Yeah.
Are we ever going to be comfortable when we hear the word change?
I think
Just a thought.
I think it so depends on how the organizational culture views change, and I think how the leader views change. I mean, some leaders love change; they thrive on it, and that can actually be a problem because they change things up to present on a board. or their ideas never get finished. And then, and there are some individual people I run into and work with who really actually thrive on change. They're more that visionary, creative, let's keep things moving type. Mm-hmm. So it really just, my experience has been that it runs the gamut. Yeah. That not everyone resists change.
Yeah. And, how do people prepare for change? And what I mean by that question is, here we are. I know change is coming. I know this is what's going on, but boy, doesn't the idea of change and culture change, the way that it's traditionally talked about, bring out the fear in most people?
I think it does, because they're concerned at some level that their culture is going to get obliterated.
Mm-hmm.
And the parts of it that they liked aren't going to be honored. And that's one of the reasons when I'm working with culture in my company is that we look at what's authentic. We stop. Yeah. We actually model slowing down and understanding what's going on in this culture. What are all the best parts of it? What are the parts that aren't so great right now? And what are the habits? What are the stories in the culture? How are people responding to things? Like we really find out, and this doesn't need to take a long time either, but we do the deep dive to figure out how this culture actually operates, so that when you decide to make a change, it's something that's authentically aligned with what's going on within the organization. And you have the other mistake, another reason people fear culture changes, they'll think, oh, it's just the leader's going to make all the decisions there at the top.
Right.
And oh my gosh, and it's just going to funnel down to us. And we're going to hear a bunch of mandates, and all the things we love are going to be gone. And maybe we're going to have fewer benefits or whatever.
Yeah.
And you have people involved in the process at all levels of the organization in different departments. Because they are also the culture, they become part of that entire change process. So while there might be things that they don't love that happen, because that's no one's going to be satisfied all the time, the majority of it they're going to have participated in and said, yeah, you know what, I got to give input on that. I got to give feedback. I like that this is important. I see how this makes sense for us as an overall organization based on our mission, our vision, and where we're hoping to go.
Yeah. This is really the thing that we don't talk about that often, and that is conversation. What are the conversations that authentic, when we're talking about authenticity, what does that conversation look like, and how does that really compare to what goes on? We're going to take a short break and we come back. Ways to shift culture, ways to make change in organization. Someone said to me a while ago, and I was really fortunate enough to research this because I didn't believe it. They said to me, it's not about the change. It's not about the end game. It's how you go about getting there. Mm-hmm. And I thought, really? So it's really not about firing somebody. It's how you get there. Lo and behold, you know what? That somebody may have been absolutely brilliant. Let's take a short break. We'll be right back.
What is a brilliant culture? And how do we create them? Why are they important? Claudette Rowley has created a breakthrough 5-step process to help you design a culture that is authentic, innovative, and successful. Learn how to create change with Cultural Brilliance Radio, the DNA of organizational excellence, and Claudette Rowley. To learn more or work with Claudette, visit ClaudetteRowley.com.
Artie Hoffman is the hottest psychic with the warmest heart and the host of the hit show Angels and Answers. A renowned psychic, medium, spiritual life coach, and an entertaining motivational speaker, Artie has helped over 15,000 people with his amazing intuitive gifts, his passion, and his humor. Call 877-ANGEL-02 to schedule a personal reading or to have your own psychic Artie party. That's 877-ANGEL-02. And visit ArtieHoffman.com and Angels and Answers on Facebook.
Get ready to rid yourself of all that is weighing you down and holding you back from living the life you want for yourself. Coming Clean, The Art of Transparency with Catherine Moss is a hit show for women in recovery who are ready to live life on purpose. Tune in and let Catherine help you live your truth one day at a time.
Live each Tuesday, 9 a.m. Pacific on TransformationTalkRadio.com.
In retirement, will you outlive your money? It's a common question for people approaching retirement, but it doesn't need to weigh on you. Ask Ameriprise financial advisor Jeff Packman about the new Confident Retirement Approach. You and Jeff can break down retirement planning step by step to get the real answers you need. Call Jeff Packman, financial advisor, today at 425-453-0272. Office is located at 601 108th Avenue Northeast, Suite 1800, Bellevue, Washington, 98004. The Confident Retirement Approach is not a guarantee of future financial results. Investment advisory products and services are made available through Ameriprise Financial Services, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Ameriprise Financial Services, Inc., member of FINRA and SIPC.
Beyond being this amazing neurologist, inventor, author, Dr. Dan Cohen has been called to look at technology and look at personal and spiritual development and merge these together. His technology uses the healing and psychospiritual effects of synchronized sounds, vibrations, electromagnetic fields, and how that interacts with us in our nervous system in what we're calling the Soultech chair.
The Soultech Lounge induces profound levels of relaxation that transition over time into deep meditative states. The synchronized sound, vibration, and magnetic field induce these states. The subject doesn't have to work at it.
To learn more, go to SoultechWellbeing.com. That's SOLTEC Wellbeing.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. It's so great to have all of you turn us on here at Cultural Brilliance Radio. Claudette, take a moment, if you would, before we talk about the ways that we could go about this, right? Take a moment to let folks know how can they sign up for the Leadership Mindset? How can they find out more about you? And what's the best way if folks want to chat with you directly about their organization? Just give folks the information they need to contact you, if you don't mind.
No, thanks so much, Pat. So my website is culturalbrilliance.com. My direct line is 781-538-6616. And I would love to chat with folks about their organizations and their cultures. Leadership Mindset is right there on the website to sign up. And it's a very short email that comes in your inbox. Yeah, so short, important, not a long thing to read. That comes in your inbox on Monday mornings. Depending where you are in the world. Yeah. But sometime.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, you're going to see lots more. Claudette has got these fabulous articles being uploaded to her blog. It's a big conversation when we're talking about culture. It's even bigger when we're talking about brilliance. Let's talk about one of our favorite topics here. It doesn't matter to me if you're working for a large corporation, a small corporation, you work for yourself or you don't. Ways to shift and change culture. We're talking about people here. So how do we go about this? We're not just changing this thing that has no face.
Right, exactly. And it's so much it is the how, right? How we do it. How we could, two organizations could say they want to become more innovative, right? Which is a hot topic these days, right? They want more innovative cultures, and they could both, even let's say companies in similar industries, they're both in, let's say, high tech. They both want to have more innovative cultures, and it's the how is gonna be what matters, because one company could do it really well, and the other company could not do it well, and they're maybe not going to get an innovative culture, and they could even have less productivity in their company. So it's really about putting a plan in place that's actually what I would call designed, which is part of the cultural brilliance model, that we've consciously and intentionally decided or designed how we're going to put this change in place. How we're going to develop a more innovative culture. So could be, so we pull everybody together and we, as a company, define what innovation actually means, right? Because otherwise you're going to have 15 different definitions of innovation in your company because it's not a particularly concrete word. And you start from there and you have a process in place that people generally agree on. Okay, now we know what innovation means. How can our company become more innovative? What would that look like here? You would get into what function you would need to change. Do people need to get trained or coached? They need to learn some things. We can't just say, okay, voila, become innovative. How will we know if we've become innovative? What's our reason for even doing this? So you continue to have a set of conscious and intentional conversations. So you all understand as a culture what you're doing, why you're doing it, and then how you're going to actually get there and how you'll know if you've gotten there, and you can move forward from there.
Yeah. And I love what you're talking about here in terms of, and let's get back to this idea of authenticity. Mm-hmm. It is so key right now in organizations, and we're seeing it now also in the mainstream. We're seeing about what authenticity means. People do want to believe and trust, and some folks have not been able to do that. Isn't it difficult to build trust if people don't believe that the real you is showing up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be really difficult to build trust. And, sometimes that's going to be one of the reasons that becomes part of the how you move your culture forward is stepping back and saying, we don't have trust in this culture. There are certainly people who trust other individual people within the organization, but overall, we do not have trust in this culture. And I've said that to organizations, you're not going to be able to get where you want to go unless you can step back and build some trust so that people can be free to, have some psychological safety. They can feel like there's well-held vulnerability in the organization so that they're not trying to protect themselves from being vulnerable. They actually feel like they can be vulnerable. An example with that, the good old, I can admit I made a mistake. I can give and receive feedback. I don't feel like someone's out to stab me in the back, if I share an idea at the next meeting. So there was an organization, I forget the name of the company, but it's a large corporation. They run a chain of movie theaters. And one of the things that they do, and I thought this was brilliant, was they, as part of their culture, every 2 hours, people working in the theaters and other entertainment centers actually stop what they're doing and exchange feedback with each other.
Wow.
And it can be something like, because, in the last couple of hours, when you did such and such, that made it harder for me to do what I needed to do in my job. How can we make sure that doesn't happen again? How can we come together and talk about this? Like, that's literally the language. And so they have a quick conversation. And what they've done that is so phenomenal is they've tied this to their business results. They've tied it. This is part of their overall business system. So this isn't, and so I see organizations do this a lot where they'll say, yeah, this feedback thing's nice, but this has nothing to do with how profitable we're going to be. And I keep saying, actually, it has everything to do with how profitable you're going to be. And this corporation has said, this is part of our business process and system, is that you give feedback every 2 hours to each other.
Wow.
So everyone's learning. That's part of it. Everyone's learning all day long. And because of that, they were able to measure. It became more productive.
Yeah.
They actually are more innovative and cutting edge. Absolutely. Yeah. Because people aren't dragged down by the fact that there are festering conflicts.
Yeah, and that's where your words match your actions, too.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's really what we're talking about here, which is really key in the process that you use. And talking about this is, if you're going to say something, then you got to figure out how your behavior is going to match that. Mm-hmm. What a great show. Thank you so much for this today, Claudette. Thank you for joining all of us here. One last question. What is your personal message? What would you like to leave us with today?
Thanks, Pat. I'd like to leave everyone with the idea that I believe all cultures can be brilliant, and your definition, that's going to vary from organization and culture to culture, right? You're going to have your own definition of brilliance, but that most cultures and organizations can be improved, where there are places that are more successful, more profitable, where people love to go there, they're engaged, and they get to be creative and innovative. And that's my vision, is that I think any culture can be brilliant.
Awesome. Claudette Rowley, everyone. And by the way, go to culturalbrilliance.com. I'm Dr. Pat. We've got another hour coming up here on Transformation Talk Radio. Make yourselves a great day.
You've been listening to the hit show Cultural Brilliance Radio, the DNA of organizational excellence with Claudette Rowley. Conversations that are transforming the world of culture and business. You can download this podcast and find out more about Claudette and her breakthrough work at ClaudetteRowley.com. Please contact Claudette and find out how you can create a brilliant culture.